Welcome. I'm Stephanie, your host for today's Beyond the Treatment Table on behalf of APTA Private Practice Section. The topic in focus this month is business development, and our guest expert is Julie Wingen, owner of Pain and Movement Solutions, 5-location practice in South Dakota. Before I let Julie introduce herself, a little reminder about the format of the session. This isn't a webinar, there's no slide presentation. We want this to be interactive. So please turn your cameras on and throw your questions in the chat throughout. I'm going to alternate between bringing you up to join the conversation and asking questions that owners have submitted ahead of time. Let's get started with the size and location of your practice and one thing you could leave with today that would help you the most. So I'm going to put that in the chat and I'll share mine. Julie, you can put yours in too if you want.
Okay.
Okay. And if anyone wants to come off mute and say theirs out loud instead of typing it, that's good too. Okay, so my practice is in New York. I have 2 locations, so 8 therapists, eight total employees now. And one of the things that I'm interested to hear from Julie is how much she plans versus how much she follows the lead of the business. So I've always kind of just had things pop up and followed, and I don't really have any set plans. So I'm curious, someone who's a couple locations ahead, how strict and rigid the plans are versus organic. We have Michelle in Georgia with 2 offices, 1 full-time therapist and herself, and just wants to hear about your growth. Anyone else? Katie, do you want to jump in here? I see some names I recognize. Glenda, do you want to come up and share? Just take yourself off mute.
Actually, I'm in the field of industrial therapy, and I work with a lot of therapists in private practice who are either moving in this direction or growing in this direction. So I just want to expand what I can, possibly share with them as well. So, and I've been doing industrial therapy for a very, very long time, so I'm always looking at what can therapists do cash-based or whatever that can, make us better than where we're at. So thanks.
Awesome. Thanks for joining, Glenda. Probably have lots of questions for you.
I'm willing to share any of it. So
Okay, we have Jessie at Willow. She's in Hoboken and New York. She's got 1 full-time therapist and herself, so also 2 therapists. Looking forward to hearing more about when to anticipate and plan for growth and hiring with the new location opening up. So she's doing a full build out, moving from sublease to a standalone space, and kind of curious about what's going to change when it's her own space and there's more rooms to fill. Okay. Anyone else want to come up and share before we move into intros? Okay. Julie, do you want to do a little bit of a background of your practice?
I'd love to. Well, thank you for having me. My name's Julie Wingen. I'm originally from South Dakota, born and raised, went to PT school to University of South Dakota and graduated in 2011. And I had no idea that I wanted to be a practice owner. I was focused on peds and neuro is kind of where I was at. And thank God for clinical rotations because I quickly learned that peds was not where I was supposed to be. And I fell in love with outpatient private practice. So I graduated in 2011 and I joined a private practice out on the west side of South Dakota. And kind of in that first year, quickly realized that PT wasn't being delivered at the quality and the level that I knew that it could be. You know, you go through school and they tell you your direct access and your primary care. Um, but that's not how it was being in our region. You know, we are all referral based, definitely not treated as experts in the musculoskeletal system. And so I kind of quickly became disappointed on the level of care that I was seeing provided and knew that we had much more value to offer. So I guess that's what drove me to open up my own practice. I had had no intentions prior going into it. So about a year after being out of PT school, I opened my first location in 2012 in Belle Fourche, South Dakota. So Belle Fourche is a small town. South Dakota is pretty rural in general. So when I hear, I see locations about New York City and doing build outs there, that seems like on a whole different playing field than I than I do. I have a lot of colleagues that I've met from the East Coast, and it is very different. So anyway, started in 2012. We are a general outpatient practice. Being in such a rural area where there's about 6,000 people, we see pediatrics to geriatrics, women's health, cancer rehab, and everything in between. We always kind of laugh and joke that you need a bingo card at what might actually come walking through your door. When I first came to this area, when I first started in 2012, I was doing everything on my own. I was answering the phone, scheduling patients. I was doing all the filing for insurance. Um, and just bless those people that handle insurance. I remember like wanting to throw the phone when you would get off the line with them because you were trying to follow up on denials that you had. Um, and so started, did it all on my own from the start, had a really small location, really simple what equipment we had, and just started growing from there. And I think at about 2 years in, I was going to hire my first PT. And largely I was being pushed into it. We were growing and I needed to, but I was pregnant with our first child. And so I needed somebody to cover my maternity leave. So it was a nice little push to get somebody hired. Um, Unfortunately, during that pregnancy, we found out that my son was going to be born with hypoplastic left heart, which meant that we were going to have many years of hospital stays and surgeries ahead of us. And so my first maternity leave that I was planning for it to be, your standard 3 months, I was gone for almost a year and I was completely states away, just trying to run my business from a hospital room. So I had a new grad there and a new front office person and just doing everything that I could to kind of keep the doors open. And when I look back at it, it's always just amazing to know that we've made it through that. I had a really awesome team, amazing people working for me at the time that were super supportive and a very supportive community that I was in that helped us during those times. So everything went well with that. Come back, and then over the next couple years, there was more extended leaves that I had to take, and I had two more children in the process. And then about 2019, I always joke that I was done having kids and needed a new project. And so that's where I knew that I wanted to start investing in my business. I didn't know I had aspirations to continue to grow our clinic, but we kept hearing comments back from people that our level of care that we were providing was different than other places they had received care. And so that inspired me to want to get more like high achieving therapists out in the world that wanted to practice the full scope of PT and practice at the top of their license. And so that was kind of my main driver in wanting to have more locations.
So
Uh,
I'm going to come back for a second. So from 2012 to 2019, you had the one location, one therapist, one admin.
I would say at 2019, we were up to 3 providers.
Okay,
It was
three
just kind of
providers still in the
slow
one
growth.
location.
Yep, in one location.
Okay. And
Yep.
then at that point, that's when you're ready to open the second location and really start focusing on this expansion.
Yes. Yeah, and that was kind of like a real turning point in the industry. I'd been in practice for 7 years and I had done nothing but take cuts in my reimbursement, over 7 years. And it was starting to become, I kind of ran my business on a very healthcare perspective. We all went to school to get our DPTs, not our MBAs. And so I kind of felt like as long as I provided really great care and I kept my providers happy, then everything would run smoothly, right? And I would have a successful business. And that was working for a while for me. But as you continue to scale and our reimbursement was less and our providers are wanting more compensation, you got to figure out how to bridge that gap. And so at 2019, I actually had become chair of our reimbursement committee for our state chapter. And I was very unqualified for it. I was just asked if I would step in. And I went outside my comfort zone and I said yes. And that was a real turning point for me because it really has just been a snowball of effect of opportunities and connections that have helped me continue to grow my business to where I am now. And so I was sitting in one of the meetings, or I was leading one of the meetings and got done, and a practice owner called me afterwards and she said, "You should join peer to peer." And I had no idea what that was. I honestly wasn't that involved in private practice section up until that point. Um, it was just, I wasn't investing back in myself or in the business. I was just grinding and trying to keep everybody else happy, in the process. And so, she's like, she told me about peer to peer and she said, I have colleagues that have done it and they've all grown. You should really consider it. So I said yes again and joined peer to peer, got highly involved in the private practice section. And that was a huge, huge turning point where a lot of momentum started. And in one of my meetings with our peer-to-peer group, I had said that I wanted to grow my practice and have more locations. And one of my beloved members called me afterwards and said, "Hey, Julie, I am all for that. But you need to get your ducks in a row before you do that so that it's successful." Because prior to that, I was doing it all on gut emotions and what did the bank account say? Yeah, I think the bank account looks okay. We can probably give you a raise. I had read Impact magazines and knew about KPIs, but I didn't know how to use them. I had objective information, but didn't really have any idea of how to implement or utilize that to help grow my business and manage the business. So I went all in with peer to peer. And then I also hired a business consultant at that time as well that was PT focused and just jumped in with both feet. And then in 2022, we opened up our second location. 2023, we opened up our third location. And then at the beginning of 2025, we opened up two more locations. So that's kind of where I'm at right now.
What was the what was the hardest part of getting your ducks in a row, as you said? So going from emotion driven to systems.
Yes. That takes a lot of time and effort. And at that point in 2019, I was still treating 40 hours a week, and you were still kind of the face of the business. People wanted to come see you. They didn't just want to come to the clinic. Like you were known as the owner that started it. And so I didn't feel like there was time to back down to work on the business, nor did I understand the value of taking that time away to work on the business. Because, right, if you're not seeing patients, you're not making money. And so that was kind of the gap, and I needed some encouragement. So I think my peer-to-peer group was part of that, like telling you, like, you have to back down. And so I started with taking Tuesday mornings off, like 4 hours that I was going to commit each week to working on my business. And then through our peer-to-peer, we learned about Traction, which is the EOS, which is Entrepreneurial Operating System. And I kind of went all in on that system and used that as my guideline to help start setting up systems. So just as simple as even starting with creating your vision and your mission. I did not have that stuff. I thought that was real soft. I didn't understand why somebody would need that in a small practice like mine. But we made our vision and our mission and our core values, and it's truly was a huge cultural change across our company because anything that we are doing, we could always come back to, well, this is what our mission is. This is what our vision is. We act this way or we treat our patients this way because these are our core values. So it was a really strong cultural shift at that point. And
Who's read Traction? Can you just put yes or no in the chat so that we know? Um, I haven't read it myself yet, but I purchased it after our call on Tuesday.
good, yes.
Okay, so it's new to most people here so far. So Julie, just so you have some context when you're
Yeah.
explaining the system.
I also knew nothing about it either, right? Because I don't have my MBA. I have my DPT, and we don't talk about this stuff in school. And so I started it really opened up my eyes to what it takes to run a business, like to turn your company into a business that can be scaled easily, and to make sure that you have margins and you're making decisions objectively. So, other books that I read during this time, and I didn't read any of them actually, except Traction. Traction I did read because you have to highlight and like just take your time working through it. But The Advantage, I read that. That's talking a lot about setting your business up in a systematic way. There's a book called Profit First, which is talking about making sure that you're keeping your profit, right? Um, and another easy one was E-Myth. So these are, I always listen to audio. I can take in a lot of information while I'm cleaning my house or something through a good audiobook.
In motion.
Yeah. So I guess those are kind of what helped spiraled and helped me understand what an organized, scalable business looked like. And then I have a huge credit to working with my business consultants. They helped me make those changes because I did call them and I was like, I don't need you to tell me what to do. I need you to help me do it because that's always seems to be like the disconnect. Like, as a practice owner, you know that we have a never-ending to-do list of all the things that we have to do, but it's trying to prioritize what's most important and then having somebody that's done it before that can help mentor and guide you through it was huge and actually making that progress.
More of holding you accountable to the priority list versus there's always 100 things to do.
Yes.
I'm curious, how did your team, your existing team, respond with these changes?
Yes. So I pulled them into it. So our core values, I was doing annual meetings anyways. And so we took our annual meeting and sat down and talked about who are we as a company? Why are we different than other companies? And just did a lot of like whiteboard, poster paper, scribbling out, post-it sticky notes so everybody could put in their information on who we are and why we're different. And then used that information to help design our core values. So I tried to include them with like along on the process so that it was easier to have that change management and buy-in and they could feel ownership in what we were doing. So that was very well received, like setting up our core values and our mission. We also went through part of the EOS. There's a portion in there that talks about your proven process. Um, as I grew my business and when you have your first practice, you are your reputation of your clinic, it's always nerve-wracking, right? To bring on your next provider and are they going to be delivering care at the same quality? How can we ensure that our quality doesn't get diluted as we continue to grow? And that's something that I'm always evaluating. And one of the ways that in the Traction book, it talks about developing out your proven process. And so that's been something that we're always kind of working on throughout the years, but I had my team initially start with it. What does our phone call look like? Why is that different than a different phone call? What does our first initial evaluation look like that's different? And follow-up visit, our financial experience, um, even like our branding, what is that? All of those things kind of outline your system of care, and people like consistency. And so, how can we make it more consistent when somebody's coming in and might be seeing a different provider? Um, so they were on board with that. The one The one issue that I think I had the most tension on was our incentive plan. So as I joined peer-to-peer, they do KPI benchmarking. So you input what your KPIs are. And I guess, does everybody know what KPIs are? So these would be like your units per visit, units per hour, how many visits you're seeing. So you're taking all your objective data that way and or your arrival rate, and you input that in and then in the KPI benchmarking study, it gives you that data across the nation. And that was extremely eye-opening for me because we were very much underbilling. And I knew it wasn't because my providers weren't spending time with patients. It was more that they weren't educated on how to capitalize on their billing. And as we continued to take cuts, it was a really good time to make that change management. It wasn't just me, the greedy owner, saying like, hey, you need to bill more. It was very much tied to this is happening in our industry. We cannot be leaving money on the table. You need to make sure that you're billing for what you're doing. And start kind of changing your strategies there. And so we started becoming much more number based. Our providers get a dashboard every week on their KPIs because it's tied to what their bonus is quarterly. And so they're getting information on a weekly basis, letting them know how they're performing so that they ultimately are controlling their bonus based on how their performance is throughout that quarter. And I know some of the pushback I got in the beginning was like, we don't want to be a business that's all about numbers. And I was like, yes, I don't either. But I also want to continue to be a business because if we can't maintain our margins, and we can't collect for the care that you're providing, it's hard for me to pay you the salary that you're wanting and continue to keep our doors open. So that took a while to kind of change that culture that numbers are good. They're not an evil, greedy thing, that it actually helps us. When you look at them, it can tell you the quality of care that you're providing to your patient. That objective number does tie back to, does the patient value the care? Do they keep coming to their appointments? Do they value your time as a provider? And so we can show them that it is tied to the quality of care that we're providing, and that's why we're looking at those numbers as well.
It sounds like you translate those numbers into words and give them meaning that a provider values. How do you deal with sometimes I hear, um, I'm a PT, I don't really understand numbers, I don't like looking at spreadsheets. Like, how do you deal with someone who's just more not reports driven?
Yeah, that's a that's a good question. Um, there are people like that, and we usually bring it back to, so when we onboard a new therapist, the first 3 months we're using their KPIs because we need to train them and help them understand because most providers do not come in understanding what any of those KPIs are because they're not being held accountable to them in other locations. Um, I like them, so we attract high achieving therapists, the ones that were graduating at the top of their class, previous collegiate athletes, just high performers in general. And so I always tie it back to that. It's like, remember in school, you wanted to know what your grade was? Like, this is your grade. Like, this is your report back on how you're being as a therapist. I remember my first year out of PT school, I'd ask my boss, like, hey, how am I doing? And he would just be like, great, you're doing great. And it's like, no,
Oh,
but
that's
how am
great.
I doing? Like, how do I compare to others? What's my, like, what's my grade? Like, um, and so they resonate with that because we've all done lots of schooling, right? So I'm like, this is essentially your grade, and you can understand how your patients are viewing the care that you're providing them. And we're going to use this next 3 months for you to help understand why you're getting these on a regular basis so that you know how you're performing. And so it's that tie of helping them understand that it might be a report, it might be a number, but it truly is like a subjective rating or it's an objective number for your quality of care that you're providing. And our therapists are motivated by that. The ones that haven't been end up leaving, which is an okay thing. They kind of realize, we do have had therapists leave to go into hospital systems that they don't want to be graded. They don't, and that's okay with us.
That's fair. This is a good time to ask. We had an owner submit a question ahead of time. In the first round of hiring, wanting to know how to manage different personalities. So if you're hiring someone who is a great therapist on paper, like you're saying, a high performer, but maybe a different personality than the owner, and maybe coming in with some biases from past experiences where they were either micromanaged or the numbers were used they were used in a way that made them never want to talk about numbers again.
Yeah, that's that's tough. We brought on in 2023, we brought on a group of therapists that had been a company had closed down, so we picked up a big group. And that was a time where you really had to have some strategies in place because people are used to one culture, and you're trying to shift them over. One thing that we do during just within our company on a regular basis is we use like emotional intelligence tools. So one of the ones that we currently use is DISC. And so your DISC personality type has like it tells you what personality you are. Your D's like your direct, dictator, and your I's, you're like friendly person, and your S's are your stable. They don't like change. They just want to like come in and do what, be in their rhythm. And then your C's are like your number people. And so right away, we have them take that disc so that we can understand what their personality type is. I don't do it before I hire them because everybody says you're supposed to surround yourself, with different personalities to strengthen your business. But I do want to know after I hire them what their personality type is because the more your company understands the disc, the more you understand each other and how you tick. And so I'm the only D in my company, and I'm the like direct. I want fast action. They call me like a little tornado. Like I'm here and we'll do this, 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 this. I like fast change. I've had to learn that throughout the years that when you get bigger, you stress the rest of your company out when you're making too fast of change. And I hate the details and the process and like being slow about change. And so that's something that it's helped me recognize that my team doesn't like that. And I've had to flex to make sure that I give my S's and C's more time to prepare for the change that's coming. So right away, we're talking about here's your personality type, here's my personality type, and we have the whole company's personality types listed out so everybody can see right away, oh, they're an I, they're an S, they're a C. And so that emotional intelligence of each other helps us work together and understand each other better of how to communicate and get on the same page.
That's awesome that you have everyone's personality type visible, because I've used things like that in the 90-day onboarding period, but I've used them first, sharing them with everyone. So that was going to be my question was how do we pull that through and actually make it mean something?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's having it visible and like turning it into a language, like, and we kind of joke about it. So every year at our annual meeting, there's always like something that ties back to the disc or back to emotional intelligence until it becomes common language. And so, we'll laugh of like, oh, Julie, you're being a real D, you know, or like, oh, that's your S tray coming out. I promise, I promise I'll be slow and we'll make the change as, least painful as possible. So it kind of becomes just a joke around the clinic. We did just do languages, like the languages of appreciation in the workplace. And so we have that listed up on the wall as well, just trying to help people understand, how others like to be appreciated. We've had a lot of growth and change over the past year. So trying to make sure that we're pouring back into our team and letting them know like all of this is happening because of you guys and showing our appreciation that way.
two locations at once is a good amount of change.
Yeah.
This is a good time to pause. Does anyone have any questions you want to come off mute and jump in? I'm not going to do my default and call up Andrew. I was I was sad to see you weren't here in the beginning. I'm glad you made it.
I see a question. Somebody was asking the name of the last book.
Oh,
I
Michelle,
think,
that was the E-Myth,
yeah,
right?
E-Myth, I think. Okay.
But Andrew, go ahead.
Well, no, I apologize. My work associate has, her daughter was sick and throwing up all night last night and this morning. And so, as you all know, that changes everything. And I'm just glad to be here. And so, yeah.
Happy you're here. Anyone else have a Glenda? Come on.
Mine isn't a question, it's just an affirmation or confirming what you just spoke about. I think a lot of therapists would never even think of doing personality profiles and, all of that. But I think I also started that years and years ago from a business advisor who actually created one. And it helps in all communication systems. And, if you're marketing, working with your patients, interrelationships in your offices, your home, those are extremely, extremely valuable tools. And there's a lot of them out there that you can use um, and it becomes such an easy thing to talk about. And whenever you're going to have to go have a meeting with somebody, it's important that you know where you're at and you have the tools to figure out quickly where they're at. And what's important is if you don't go to where they're at, especially if you're trying to get them to do something. In my field where I teach therapists how to do sales and marketing to employers. And we as therapists kind of come to the table. I mean, we pretty much know we give direction to patients all the time, but so they kind of have to do what we want to do. But when you're going to do marketing or selling, as you oftentimes have to do with your coworkers as well, if you're not going, they don't really need to come to you. You need to go to them. So you have to also know where you stand on that square kind of thing. So you know how far you have to go in their direction to have them even hear you. Because if you don't go to where they're at, they can't. It's not that they don't necessarily need you or want you. They just can't hear you. So I love that you've done all these business approach things. When I was first earlier on in my career, I had a business advisor. I had two business consultants for different kinds of things, and one of them pushed from the beginning to go outside of my own physical therapy field and get business training. We didn't have peer-to-peer then. And so, and encouraged me to do something big like that every couple of years. So I love what you're saying.
Thank
Glenda,
you,
that's
Glenn.
a perfect segue into Julie, what do you do on the self-development side to allow you to be able to lead a growing team and handle all of these changes and different personalities?
Yeah, that is a great question. I actually was just going through it with somebody the other week. They were saying, I can't believe you manage everything you do. And I was just started laughing. I'm like, this just didn't happen overnight. I mean, like it is taking 10 years easily of just working on self-development and self-care and different. I kind of like had this big period where I fell in love with all the self-help books and just kept listening to one after the other. And it became really clear to me that having the clarity and the organization was going to be extremely important for me to be successful, and also being able to take time to recover. So I'm a big work hard, play hard kind of person. And so like I said, with me being a D personality trait, I kind of have big visionary things and my mind's always kind of going all over the place. And so taking the time to develop the organization and structure has been really important for my team and the business to be able to scale. And then also know how to work without me. So I remember the first time I talked about EOS and I was 3.5 years in, and I had finally, my business was growing and everybody knew what their jobs and their roles were. And I was taking vacations and I was coming back from vacations and things were fine. It gets to a point where your systems are working and you don't need to be present. My inbox is still a mess. I'm still working on that. And that's like a long-term goal of mine. But, um, really just trying to pay attention to, what my why is. That was kind of where I started. Why am I doing all of this in the first place? Why am I trying to scale my business and making sure that I'm really clear on what my vision is? And then just making sure that all of my decisions align with that because we get opportunities and as somebody, that has like big ideas, you tend to chase, all sorts of different opportunities and making sure that not to just chase after that option, that new shiny object over there and making sure that aligns with your brand and your vision of with what you're doing. So that's kind of where I started. And then I took a lot of time to just focus on self-care. For the past 3 years, I've been really working on getting 7 hours of sleep because I read if you're getting if you're getting 6 hours of sleep, you're operating drunk. And so that was a huge motivator for me of like, you can get a lot, don't have more time in the day, but you can get a lot more done during your time if you are more clear and focused. There was a really good book that was a game changer for me, and it was called High Performance Habits by Brandon Burchard. And he just has tons of tips and tricks in there to help you like increase your clarity and your focus and just your intention throughout the day. Because as you guys know, as business owners, you could spend all your waking hours working on your business trying to get it perfect and it'll never be there. And so learning how do you have that balance in life, and what's most important to you. So I also like, so I've also learned throughout the years, like when we opened our 2 clinics in January, that I was going to need a beach vacation about 8 weeks after that. And so I intentionally put that on my schedule. And it's always super hard to leave because you're in the mess of things. But there's a lot of preparation time to opening, and then you get through those first 2 months and things are kind of starting to run smoothly, and you just need to walk away for a week and go get some rest and relaxation so that you can come back and help keep it progressing along.
That's a great reminder to take the time to step back, even when it feels like you can't.
Mhm.
You can come back and be so much more valuable to your team and the people who need you if you're fresh.
Yes.
Something else that you brought up with the opportunities and different directions that you could get pulled. There is an owner who submitted a question, Kristen. She wanted to know how you developed relationships with healthcare providers, and specifically when you're going into a new location and the providers that you're reaching out to maybe already have their PT that they refer to. How do you even open the door to start some of those conversations?
Yeah, I would say that is not our strongest area of our referral source. Early on in my career, I was trying to market to physician groups, and right away, we have a very hospital dominant area. So we're a small region and there's one hospital system. And then every community has their hospital-based PT. And I was talking to one of our local primary cares, and he said, Julie, you're the best PT in the area, but we can't send you patients. And I said, really? Because of they get dinged if they're referring outside of their system. And so that was probably some of the best feedback I received early on in my career because it quickly shifted my focus to consumers. And so we are about 55% of our caseload is direct access. So our patients are coming to us first for their care. And so our marketing focus has always been on educating our patients. If they did come by a referral, that we're letting them know, that they don't need a referral in the future. And we're talking to them about how you should follow up with your PT on an annual basis to be preventative. Really helping kind of close the gap that and if you saw them for their shoulder, they might not, it's funny how they're like, oh, I didn't know you could treat my knee. It's like, yes, I can. And so making sure you can bridge that gap, like, hey, if you have anything going on in your body, you got pain or movement issue, like that's our specialty, and come to us first, we'll get you feeling better. And so that's kind of where a lot of our focus has been. But when we do move into the new areas, we want to let the providers know that we have a new location open. Our region's small. So like right now, all of our providers are all of our same referral sources for actually all of our clinics. And so it's more so just educating them that we have a new location available. And we do that by sending faxes. So we'll fax, our notification, and then we have contacts within those groups too. So if I like have the surgeon's numbers or the primary care's number, I'll make sure that I text them and be like, hey, just hoping you saw this. Like we have a new location open. And then we follow up with their front office within the first week, or like within the 2 weeks around the opening date, to make sure that they have us listed in their system so that they can be sending referrals. And when it comes to developing relationships with our referring providers, it's a lot been about presentations. So we've had really good luck with our pain management group. They actually, a couple in the region, they see us as referrals sources to them. We are referring them patients all the time. And so they wanted to come present to us and have that opportunity to share everything that they do. So we're inviting them into our clinics to give a presentation to our team, and that helps start building that trusting relationship back and forth. And we've had providers go shadow with them then and spend an afternoon with them, because those primary cares, they want to hear how you take care of patients, because they don't take care of the conservative musculoskeletal aspect like we do. They're kind of like the last option. And so they want to know what we're doing and what's helping their patient get better. So I would say just lots of opportunities and then the alternative, we've gone into other private entities and presented to them on how our physical therapy, like what our company is about and how we practice physical therapy and what our services are. And so we've had a lot of positive feedback that way, that they really appreciate learning everything that we can do, because a lot of times they don't know. So if you can get them to take the time to listen to your presentation, that's been super helpful for us.
It's nice to hear that it doesn't matter what location you're in. So in New York City, we do the same thing where we have our referral partner come in and do an in-service for us. We do it over Zoom because we're all in different areas. But I think that's been the best way, because our healthcare providers then see that we're looking to refer to them, we're looking to learn about their business, and then that opens the door. So it's nice that it works regardless of the location.
Yes. Well, it's all about relationships. Your patient outcomes are going to be better when you can talk openly, like, oh, I know Dr. Tachek, and this is what he'll do. Your patient automatically, their satisfaction and expectation for improvement is already higher, because they know you're working together as a team. And unfortunately, that's becoming less and less common, in our healthcare industry.
Something else I wanted to touch on is your approach to marketing direct to consumer. So last month, our topic was social media marketing, and it was very focused on niching down, speaking to your target patient population. And what you talked about when you opened is that you see everything. So how do you market direct to consumer when you don't necessarily have a small niche?
Yeah, I've always wondered that, when I read all the impact articles, right? I'm like, but we see everything. So what are we supposed to say? So I think that's where our company name started, was like, if you have a pain or a movement issue, like, we are your experts in this area. So we do try to always bring that back to their attention. Um, when it comes, when it comes to educating our consumers, we're just talking their ear off the entire time, that they're in the session about what they have going on. That's one of the things that really sets us apart, is our patient education. So you're educating them on why they're experiencing the issue and how we're going to get to the source of the problem. Um, and then we're talking to them about, like, oh yeah, we do this for neck and we do this for ankles and shoulders and dizzy patients. And you're just trying to constantly have a communication about what physical therapy is and what it can all, what kind of value we can bring to all sorts of different diagnoses. And so our past patients are our best referral source, because they're telling others about us for word of mouth, and then they're returning as patients. So when it comes to, like print marketing and social media, that honestly, we haven't quite figured that out, what's the best, but we just try to stay on brand with, we say, what moves you, for any pain or movement issue. And then we always say no referral needed to help patients get in.
Love it. I'm going to ask if anyone else wants to come up and jump in. All right. I know a couple people on the call, so I'm going to do it. Lindsay, what questions do you have?
Okay, so you mentioned at the early when I hopped on initially, creating that culture of clarity with your employees. And one thing that I run into, and I'm curious your advice on, is with younger employees, I find a lot of times that they kind of like to hide, right? And these are, good employees. It's not the toxic, they're doing something wrong, right? But I find younger employees, especially in like more admin roles, struggle with being seen, right? And then the metrics make everything very clear, in team meetings and things. And instead of finding comfort in that, like a high achiever, sometimes they feel threatened by it, right? Especially in a team setting, when it's like, yeah, we all have like strong weeks and down weeks, and it's super normal. So just curious kind of how you coach employees through that when it might be a new concept for them.
Yeah, that's a good question. So when they get their KPIs, we intentionally chose to keep them private. So they get their KPIs and then they get their clinic's KPIs. And so hopefully they can figure out by math, right? Like they have their doctorate, like how they're performing compared to the clinic, but nobody else knows exactly what your numbers are. So your high achiever can get their KPIs and see that they're above the average. They know they're bringing the average up, and then if you're bringing the average down. And so I think not having it be public knowledge has helped them be able to work, like be more open to receiving it, so they don't have to worry about what others are thinking about their quality of care. And so I meet with all my providers, my direct reports at this point, one time a month. So our PTs are met by somebody, one time a month. And they have to set an annual KPI goal. And so we do have baseline standards, like here's our baseline. We need you to achieve baseline. And then the way our incentive program is set up is they get a standard base salary, and then how much more they want to make is really, the ball is in their court. And so that has been a huge relief for me, over the past years, because now I'm putting it back on the provider. You're telling me you're a really great PT, and you deserve more money. Perfect. Prove it. You will earn more money based on our incentive plan if you're a really great provider. And so that then in their annual review is, where do you want to be? What tier do you want to hit on a quarterly basis? And I'm going to help coach you there. And so if you're missing the mark on that tier, then I can talk to you about it. And I tell them right from the beginning, I don't want to be hounding you about the numbers. You know, I don't want to be pushing you to do this. I want you to meet our baseline standards. You should be able to meet those. Nobody else in our company has trouble meeting baseline standards. And then I want you to let me know where you want to go, and I can help you bridge the gap and give you some feedback on that.
Thank you.
We
Yes.
probably have time for one or two more questions. I'm going to ask Jesse, do you have anything to?
I've had a couple of questions. So the first one was, so like I feel like was traumatized by productivity KPIs in my last job. I worked at a large practice in New York City and felt that no matter what I did, I could never hit that productivity um, standard. And granted, it was a mixture of disciplines similar to your practice, and I was practicing pelvic health, which I believe has a lot more obstacles in terms of arrival rates, productivity, how many patients you can see in a day. But that experience like really turned me off to having regular meetings, dashboards, and productivity. Uh, Not obviously there's a number that people have to meet. We can't survive as a business otherwise, but it turned me off to um, maybe having those conversations or making that a focal point of someone's performance. And I'm just curious if you have any alternatives that you would recommend to making sure that employees are being productive, but like not like the not having that same sentiment or like that same experience that I think maybe I don't want to speak for everyone, but a lot of people, at least in this area, I think have experienced.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry that that happened. I have picked up other providers that have come from clinics that have productivity standards, you know, and it's maybe a percentage of like how many visits they need to be seeing. Um, I think the way that we do it differently is just always tying it back to what that KPI means. You know, if your arrival rate is high, that means that your patients are valuing your time and they're coming to their appointments. And that means that you are providing them enough value during that session that they don't want to miss it. So we all have had our hair done, right? Like I will cancel everything to not miss my hair appointment because I know it's going to be like 8 weeks before she can get me in again. And so we always kind of laugh and joke that you know you've made it as a PT if somebody cancels their hair appointment to come to your visit instead. So, um, so we look at, so that's a arrival rate example, right? Units per hour, some of that's tough. Like that one's kind of used when it comes to compensation. You know, if you're talking to them about like, hey, I want to be paid more. But they're looking at your units per hour, and if it's less than all your other providers, you're not bringing in as much revenue. And so that's when you have to come, that's that hard part, right? Of bridging the gap of having to run a business and having to take care of your patients. And so when we talk a lot about looking at our company as a three-legged stool, and that's thanks to my consultants. But you have your patient experience. We want, right? We want to have really positive patient experience. And that's all I thought I needed on the front end is good patient experience and a good employee experience, that they love where they work. But people love where they work when they feel compensated, you know, for their value that they're providing. And so then you need to bring in that third leg of the stool, which is business stability and helping them understand this is, you know, like we need you to bill at this, or we need you to produce so much revenue so that we can pay you what you want to be paid. And there's no other way to bridge that gap. That's just how our industry works. And when you signed up to be a PT, I always feel like they do us a big disservice in PT school by not telling us that. Like, you can't get paid by spending an hour and a half with a patient, and billing 4 units for it. Like that's not efficient. And right now our healthcare industry has to run so lean, and especially PT is running so lean. And so I do my best to educate my team on the changes that were happening, so I'm very forward with them of like, hey, Medicare cut us again this year, and this is what it means for us this next year and how we're going to respond, because I don't want to cut your salary, but my, what we're getting paid is getting cut. So somewhere we have to do something different so that you can continue to make money while we continue to make less money. Like something has to change. And so I think education is huge on it. And it seems like when they understand what's going on, it's easier for them to get behind the metrics and why we're looking at them and why they matter. And then, of course, tying them back to quality of care. Like when you always go back and talk about each one of these KPIs can reflect on your quality of care, that helps them understand and find ways to improve it. I'm not sure if that helped with your question, but that's the success, that's kind of seemed to be how we've utilized it in our company and have kind of changed the culture. Nobody seems to care about the numbers. If anything, they're asking where they are if they're late that week. So,
Any follow-ups? Good, Jesse.
I had another question, but unrelated. Stephanie mentioned my clinic in the beginning. We're doing a full build out. I have one full-time therapist, and I think from like a gut check that I am in need of another full-time therapist, but it's very scary to like commit to that and know if I really need it. So I'm curious if you have ways to assess and predict to be a little bit more sure that that's the right next step.
yes. So that's where your KPIs come in. So you're looking at your new patients, right? Like, one of our KPIs that we track is, how many new patients you have and then what your visits per new are. And so that helps you determine, this provider can see this many visits a week. Okay. Um, how many how many new patients do they need to have in a month that creates that many visits? And so we take our data, take your data from the last year and you take how many visits you've done and divide it by how many new patients you had. So that'll give you your visits per new. So then say you had 22 new patients this month. And if your visits per new is 10, that means those 22 new patients is going to create 220 visits that next month. Does that make sense? So then you can kind of sit and watch your trends based on how many new patients you're seeing per month versus how many visits you're seeing. And when we know that we need another provider is when our visits per new actually potentially starts dropping because we can't get patients up and our new patients is rising. So if we're seeing more new patients, but our visits per new is decreasing, that's showing us that we don't have the capacity to see those patients. And then we look at our providers on how many visits per hour they're seeing, and I can very objectively quick see everybody's maxed out. Like there's no capacity in our schedule to see our new patients. And that shows us that we need to get another provider added. And then you figure out how many, like you're going to bring on this new provider. Okay, so now we're going to have this many available visits, each month. How many new patients do we need to fill that schedule? So it kind of helps you get your mind wrapped around how many new patients you need to be coming in each month to fill up your new provider. Is that helpful?
So there's a formula. There's a nice, clear formula. Perfect. Well, we only have a minute left, so I want to thank you, Julie, for sharing your experience and spending the hour with us. If there are any follow-up questions, Kat is going to put the email in the chat. It's info@ppsapt.org. So you can ask any follow-up questions if you were taking notes and you want to clarify something with Julie. We'll make sure she gets it. And if anyone who hasn't given me feedback can stay on for a minute or two, so maybe Glenda or Lindsay H, if you want to hang out for a minute and just talk to me about how the session went, that would be really helpful. Just a reminder, this is every fourth Thursday at 1 p.m. So in Andrew's words, this is our standing time for owners to come together and work on their business. In August, we have Matthew Hansen coming on to talk about negotiations. In September, for innovation and technology, we have Drew Contreras. And in November, we have finance, which is going to be covered by Chris Albanese. And then December 4th, we're going to have a special edition that we'll let you know about. So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate seeing so many familiar faces. And thank you, Julie.
Well, thank you for having me. And I shared my email address in the messages. So I love talking business. So feel free to reach out about anything. And if you see me at PPS or some PPS event, please make sure you stop by and say hi.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thanks, guys.